Then also another question that I find quite helpful to ask is, what am I wanting to role model to my children?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do I want my children to grow up thinking that a good mother sacrifices her needs for the rest of the family?
Definitely not.
Hi everyone, welcome back to No Place Like Home. We are here again today with Katie Parker. I am Larissa and we're here with Jess.
Hello.
And today we are talking about managing society's expectations.
This is a big one.
Feels big.
I think that anyone who is a mother or a parent can relate to that, the overwhelming tirade of advice, opinions, expectations that we're faced with when we have a child. And I'd love to chat with you a little bit about how we can manage that. Mm-hmm. If you've got any tips or, advice about.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think it's important that we acknowledge that motherhood is a social construct.
Mm-hmm.
So it is not, and a lot of what we do or the expectations that we set for ourselves are based on these unrealistic societal expectations that come from, a whole range of places. So, for example, what we see in the media, these days, what we see on social media a lot, how we were conditioned to be growing up, how we were socialised, what we saw our mothers doing and how well they were meeting their own needs or that sort of thing. So, and this differs from culture to culture.
Yeah.
So it's not universal. So here in our Western culture, we very much were socialised to believe many things about what a good mother should be. So if you sort of, ask the question of what's a good mother? So from the research, we know that, like the perfect mother in air quotes would be someone who, for a start, they're white, heterosexual, married, 2.5 kids, one of each sex, loves everything about being a mother, works outside the home but not too much. So doesn't want
preferably in a volunteer role.
Is always calm, doesn't get angry.
Dinner on the table.
Yeah, I was going to say, bakes food from scratch, plays with her children, creates different, and, is always focused on meeting her child's needs first.
Kids' activities.
Yeah. So very much self-sacrificial. So puts her needs right at the bottom of the list, meets everybody else's needs first. We have this idea in our mind about, what the perfect mother is. I think a really good analogy for this is actually something called the fish tank of motherhood model, which was developed by Dr. Sophie Brock, and I love this analogy. The way she describes it is that there's this tank, there's a fish tank, and that's the society that we're living in. And then us, the mothers, are the little fish swimming around, and the act of swimming is actually the act of mothering. So us swimming around the tank is us, engaging in our mothering role, and the water that we are swimming in, that's how we were social. Like that's our, the cultural.
Our environment.
Environment that we were sort of born into.
Right.
Yeah. And so then she talks about having like rules on the tank. So what we see as we're swimming around the tank are these rules, and we're always trying to live up to these rules, and these rules are reflected back to us. So we're always trying to, live up to these particular expectations. And what she talks about is what we really want to be doing in terms of being more empowered in our motherhood is actually ramming the tank.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah. Isn't that a great analogy?
Oh.
Yeah.
I just saw myself as a fish ramming that glass.
So So I think, and this is something that I will always share with clients, at the start of this, whatever the issue is, so much of it comes back to understanding the culture that we're mothering within. and that these expectations that we're trying to live up to are made up. Like they're literally made up. So what we need to do, well, the aim is to actually to get to a point of actually living our own, reclaiming our own motherhood experience, is getting in contact with what our values are, getting clear on our values and what sort of mother or parent we want to be, and actually pushing back, the ramming the tank is really pushing back against those shoulds and working out, well, what works for me and my children and my family.
How would you even start that process, Katie? If you have been that fish in that tank just reading all those rules and you don't know that you can ram against the tank, where does someone even start to deconstruct that thought pattern and that environmental kind of construct that you're in?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Well, starting by acknowledging or identifying, I suppose, what expectations you've put on yourself or that you're feeling other people are putting on you. One question I'll often start with is actually asking someone, well, how do you define what a good mother is? And then looking at, okay, with all these expectations that either you've put on yourself or you've internalized from your, growing up in your family or just from, broader society's expectations that we feel pressure to live up to. Looking at which ones of those are actually in alignment with how you want to be living your life and which ones are not. And going through this process of acknowledging and identifying which ones we can let go of, essentially, because that's some idealised version of motherhood that
it's not actually serving you.
It's not serving me
not
at all. Yeah. So that would probably be the first step, and getting clear on the values. And so, when we're experiencing, what we sort of come to know as mum guilt, that's how that's the process we go through of how to reduce the mum guilt is to look at, okay, what are the expectations, and looking at these rules, these set rules of motherhood, and there's a process, I take people through, but looking at the rules and working out, is that in line with my values or not, or is that just a made up rule that actually has nothing to do with my experience and is not the way I want to be living my life. And so when we can work out what is us trying to meet outside pressures versus what is actually calling us to come back into alignment with our values, differentiating those two things, and then that's how we sort of can work out whether the guilt is justified or not. Is it actually guilt? Because I would argue that the guilt that we experience because we're measuring ourselves up against these unrealistic expectations, it's not really guilt. It's the other guilt is
it's unfounded.
Because I feel like I'm well schooled on all of this, but I still feel mum guilt. So hearing you say that is well, maybe it's actually not guilt that I'm feeling. Maybe it's something else.
And I hear all the time from mums that they feel guilty about having a night away or I don't know, whatever the thing is. And a lot of it is around because they're meeting their own needs and they're prioritising their self-care, and that has meant that their children have been cared for someone else. So, for example, one part of, idolised motherhood is that, the biological mother cares for her children 24 hours a day.
It's a generational thing as well, isn't it, Katie? I think just thinking about the environment, there's a lot that shapes how we mother by the way that we were mothered.
Oh, yeah. And this is where the mother wound comes in.
Yeah.
Which we talk about in a future episode.
Yeah, exactly. And identifying that as well. So what I'll often, talk to mums about is what was role modelled to you as a child. What was your imprinting around what it meant to be a good mum? And a lot of the time I hear things like, mum never had a break. She never sat down. She was always baking us things from,
Yeah.
you know, baking us healthy meals from scratch. She'd always have dinner on the table when Dad got home from work. You know, all of these things which are like, who says that's a good mum?
No, yeah.
I don't do
And the
any of
thing
those
is,
things
like,
in my own motherhood.
The thing is, if we are, and I'm sure you're probably going to lead into this as well, but you're actually, if you're not meeting your own needs, you can't be the best mum because you're not, you know, Sophie's, what's it called, that diagram that she's got? We've got it in Life After Birth, where it's like that leads to rage.
Oh, the anger guilt trap.
The anger guilt trap, yeah. So
yes.
when we're putting our needs last, we're actually not being the best mums we can be because we're not filling our cups and we're not, you know, we all know how important exercise is for mental health, and everyone in my family will agree that I'm a better mum when I exercise, but I still feel guilty for going to the gym. It's ridiculous.
So why? Why is that?
Yeah, good
Let's
question.
unpack that.
Let's do that. Let's unpack that, Jess.
I think it's because I've got this idea, the version of a mum I wanted to be was that mum that's up with my children every morning, making breakfast, making lunches, taking them to school. And at the moment, it's my husband who does that stuff. And it won't be like that forever because soon he'll be a teacher and I'll be the one doing all of that. But at the moment, I feel sad and like I'm missing out on things. And yeah, I guess I'm not being the mum that I thought I would be.
So, yeah, like that's a good example. And I think that probably a lot of the mums listening to this would be able to relate to that.
The version
however,
of mum you thought you'd be versus how you are.
if we could flip that and actually see how much of a benefit that, you know, you going to the gym is to your children. So, one, that's really great for your mental health. You're getting exercise. So it's good for your physical health because you're getting exercise, and we know how good exercise is for our mental health. You're having an opportunity to sort of fill your cup. And so the feeling that you bring back into that household when you return from the gym is going to have a really positive impact on the rest of the family. Secondly, your partner is getting this opportunity to further bond with his children.
Yeah.
And thirdly, your children are having that opportunity to, you know, further develop their relationship with their father as well. So there's like so many.
Yeah, and also they say that if you see your mum or your parent exercise, then you'll exercise as an adult. And
so you're role modeling healthy.
Yeah,
you know,
and I'm really the thing is I know all of this. I know all of this, but the guilt still comes. And I'm constantly asking myself, but why? Why do you feel guilty? This is ridiculous. You've got nothing to feel guilty about. And it's, I need to let go of it. I'm going to do Sophie's course. Hopefully that'll help.
Oh, it absolutely will. And it's a process, you know. It's not like you can suddenly click your fingers and you've just let go, you know, all the guilt's gone. You know, it is a process to work through. And but yes, I think that asking that question of, is the guilt that I'm feeling, like the feeling that I've got here, is this because I'm acting out of alignment with my values? And if it is, okay, what can we do about that? How can we bring in more support? Like, how can we address that if it is?
Yeah.
But if it's just because I think a good mum should be with her children 24/7, then I'd argue that's probably where we could,
And the thing is, the other thing is, you know, it used to be so hard to get the kids to school and daycare because I still can't do daycare drop-off, like kinder drop-off with Jude, because it upsets him so much leaving me. And it actually benefits the entire family if I'm not there in the morning, because getting out the door is so much easier because there's no clinginess or sadness about leaving me. So I know that everyone is benefiting, and yet the guilt still comes.
Then also another question that I find quite helpful to ask is, what am I wanting to role model to my children?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do I want my children to grow up thinking that a good mother sacrifices her needs for the rest of the family?
Definitely not.
I've really found that to be my anchor point over probably the last 12 months, particularly after doing Lael Stone's parenting immersion course.
It's an amazing course.
But, you know, having that anchor point of how do I want to model what life looks like for my children, both my daughter and my son. But then obviously doing Lael's course reaffirmed a lot of those sorts of things. But I think in amongst this as well, there's no rush about change either. I think sometimes as mums we kind of think we're doing this wrong, we need to hurry up and fix it so that we don't, you know, tarnish our children with these sorts of... But I think the power in it is actually taking the time of reflection through all of these things, like just with your beautiful prompts, Katie, about, you know, like stay with those questions of, well, does that align with my values? And don't feel the rush to get through that process as well. What are, for mums that are listening, and really for dads and anyone that's listening, because we're all sort of interlinked through this postpartum period that never ends. It's not 6 weeks. It's not a year. It's forever. What are the tools that mothers could use to help them feel empowered to make the right choices if they don't feel confident in advocating for themselves?
Yeah, well, I think that process that I just sort of talked through before, like that would probably be one tool to work out. Yeah.
So honest conversations, right? Like honest, open conversations with yourself, with your partner if you have one, with your support network. Yeah. And that takes courage.
Yeah. And if you do need extra support, seek professional help.
Finding that someone.
You know, like this is what I work through with mums all the time. And to be honest, I didn't know this stuff before I saw, you know, like this is not something I just knew. Like this has been a process for me as well. And Lael was my counsellor for many years.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of, you know, the guilt that I've been able to let go of and, you know, the mother that I am now has been a result of intensive therapy.
Many years of work.
I have actually been very, very supported through, you know, my own processes and now feel like I'm very empowered in my mothering. It doesn't even occur to me to feel guilty.
Oh, that's amazing.
About leaving my children.
Amazing.
Like
that's
at all. But I remember the first time I did. Like when I, and it was actually to a workshop that Lael and Marion Rose were running up in Byron Bay. And my kids were, I think, almost 2 or just turned 2 and just turned 4 at the time. And I did. It was the first time I'd ever been away from them. And I did have these feelings of like, is this okay? Yeah. And I remember I sort of very nervously approached my partner and was very permission seeking in, am I allowed? Is this okay? And he was like, oh yeah, sure. Like just book your flights. And so I think as well, it really, really helps when you've got a supportive person around like that. And he was modelled that. See,
exactly.
Go back to his childhood. They lived overseas. His mum at one point returned to Australia for 6 months to finish off her master's degree while he stayed in Germany with his dad. So what did he have role modelled to him as a child? You know, a mum who prioritised her needs and was very confident that her child's father was able to, more than capable of meeting his needs.
And that's why it's so important for us to model it to our kids.
Yeah, and I think the later we leave this, I mean, one thing I would love all pregnant couples to know is the earlier the partner is involved in that care, the better. Yeah. Like it needs to happen. It needs to start from pregnancy because the longer you leave it, the bigger the gap becomes between your knowledge and confidence and all of that. And so if you don't have a partner that's involved in, you know, the rearing of your children, then it's all going to fall. It's always all going to fall on you. Yeah. So the earlier, which I mean, ideally, pregnancy, birth, you know, from that point, you have the partner involved in everything. And obviously, okay, breastfeeding would be one exception to that, but pretty much everything else, you know? Yeah. Have the partner changing nappies.
All the nappies.
Baby wearing. You know, one of the really good things we spoke in an earlier episode about my own postpartum experience. And one thing that was so supportive was every Saturday morning my partner would, and this probably didn't happen from birth, this was probably later on, but, you know, he would put our baby in the carrier and he'd walk to our local cafe and bring me back a coffee. And he'd take the dog for a bit of a walk while they're out, you know, so that would give me an extra hour sleep, you know, and just like that's just an example of how, you know, a partner could be supportive or, you know, bathing the baby or, you know, there's of course a million ways of the partner being involved, but I think that's really important as well so that you don't get to, because I speak to so many mums who years down the track are trying to prioritise their needs, but their partners don't feel confident in their own parenting ability. Yeah. And the mum feels like she's got to rush back home after she's been to her yoga class or whatever it is.
Yeah, to save the dad from the children.
Yeah. And that's not
I did
ideal.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that. I'm just, as you're talking, I'm reflecting on like
Yeah.
what, and I actually think I did a version of like I dug my own hole kind of thing. So John would probably say, oh, let me take the baby and go for a walk. And I'm like, no, I'm supposed to do that.
So some of that can be, yes, your socialization around what the good mother is and all of
Yes.
that, but and that also ties into what we call maternal gatekeeping, where the mother will actually have such rigid rules
Yeah.
around the care, and that only she can provide, because it can go that
That's
way
what
as
I
well.
haven't heard that term before, but that's wow.
Yeah. Really micromanaging that care, and returning home and like, oh my gosh, how did you survive?
Or like you did it wrong and all of that.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
just don't
That's
change
what
the
I
nappy
did.
that way. Yeah.
Yes.
And we are going to talk a little bit more in another episode about relationships specifically, but I just wanted to go back to something, and I guess because I'm conscious that some people that are listening to this might not have the financial resources to be able to seek out counselling. And so I'm wondering, and this might be a really tricky question, but what can you do or are there any resources available for people that don't have the financial means to be able to get counselling or psychology or, postpartum doulas or help to do courses, whatever it is to, going back to that, breaking down what we actually need versus what we think society expects of us.
Yeah.
Are there any free resources available, or is there anything out there for people?
Yes.
Because I don't come from money, and because there's no way I could have afforded a counsellor when I was in my postpartum with only one of us working, I'm always conscious of there being other people like me out there who
and
might
thank
not
you
have.
for bringing that up.
And I know,
Yeah.
it's people that can have the money for the stuff, they're very lucky.
Yes.
And I just don't want anyone to feel alienated by not having the financial means to access support.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And yes, there are a ton of free resources out there. So actually, I would just refer people to Sophie Brock's website.
Amazing.
She's got some fantastic free resources there.
Yeah.
As well,
we can
as
link those in the show notes.
And multiple. She's the Good Enough Mother podcast.
Yeah.
So she talks about all of
Great.
this and unpacks this in there's multiple episodes there that you
Yeah.
could listen to that would
Amazing.
actually take you through the process of
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful, I'm sure, for a lot of people.
Yeah. So that would be.
Yeah.
I mean, another resource there in terms of, and this probably we're leading more towards the relationship with your partner episode, but I think it's relevant here as well to this discussion. Is there is that fantastic book called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky.
Oh yeah, I
and
haven't read it, but I've
she has a deck of cards, and this is not so much around getting to the point of acknowledging that like working through the process that we're talking about here, but it's helpful in terms of the division of labour in the household, and
which is a huge one.
And I think we need to address that.
Yeah.
Alongside a mother also addressing her need.
Yeah.
Her needs.
Yeah.
Because if she's overloaded with the mental load and everything around the house, then where's the time to
look after herself,
engage in her own self-care?
I think it's really important for anyone who's listening, and especially if there's any dads or non-birthing parents listening, people seem to forget that being a mum, especially to a newborn, is a full-time job. Going to work is also a full-time job. The housework is additional to that. There's that expectation that if you're at home with the kids, then you can stay on top of the house. We all know how fucking hard that is. And I just think people need a reminder sometimes. So I'm just popping that in there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is why I love this this card deck, because it is actually sitting down, if for those of, you with a partner, to sit down together and work out a more equitable distribution of the household
And sometimes
tasks.
people just don't realise, that they don't realise the things that we have to carry around in our brains.
Katie, what should we, at home, obviously a big part of home is having
As in
women.
the space, not the...
Yes.
Yeah. HOMB, home. Obviously a big part of home is that we want women to walk out of that door feeling empowered and like they've really got this and they've come back to themselves. And, we've talked a lot about aligning with our values and finding out what they are. what would be some really nice things that we could implement at home with women staying that would really benefit them to have that increased sense of empowerment? Because obviously there might be already that perception of coming to a place like this because of social expectations that, and I'm hearing this a lot from women that are contacting me saying, my mum's going to have a really big opinion about this because her story to me is, well, I didn't need anything like this. Why do you need to go to a place like this? We didn't have anything like it. I raised 4 children and your father, that story that we get fed. How do we further instill that empowerment that you're actually doing a good thing for yourself by being here? What would be some?
There's probably a few things. So, I mean, one simple practical thing would be having a conversation with that mother around making a self-care plan, essentially. Like, how are you going to prioritise your needs and just consistently, I suppose, re-emphasising the message that you are worthy, your needs matter.
And you're going to be a better mum if you put your needs first or if you prioritise your needs.
Yeah, and that, absolutely. You can't pour from an empty cup. We all know this, this is very cliche saying. But I think it's important, as well as acknowledging how much of a better mum you're going to be when your own cup's been filled. Also, like, as a human being, you are worthy. Like, what? Like, it's like, we send our kids off to different activities or the sport or the whatever it is. Like, we're not sending them there because like where they're going to be a better child. Like, we send them there because it's something they enjoy doing, and that's part of our human experience, like to live a rich and meaningful life. So we're all worthy of doing things that we enjoy. I think, a byproduct of our, this Western patriarchal capitalist culture that we live in is that, we're just sucked into this busyness cycle.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, where success equals, productivity equals success and, being on the hamster wheel constantly, like, what for, and for what purpose are we on this constant cycle of busyness and this fast-paced, like, constantness? Like, I think if we can just, and I think, clarifying your values, like getting clear on what your values are, is a really great place to start, because then, asking yourself, well, what matters most to me? What's most important in my life? Like, when I'm on my deathbed and I'm looking back on my life, what do I want to remember about that time?
Yes.
And it's probably not the rushing around and the doing everything to meet everyone else's needs. It's actually the slowing down and being present.
It's the redefining, for me, like, just listening to you, it's the redefining of what success actually is, because I think the materialism that we've put around that word success conjures up a very different image in your mind of what success is. But
likewise with productivity. It's like rest is productive.
Rest is absolutely productive, but it's hard.
My goodness me, it's hard to implement.
So hard.
And
I had to cut my leg open to rest.
Well, that's often what happens, particularly to women. And we know this from the research. If you read Gabor Mate's book, The Myth of Normal, there's so much research around, like, women ending up with physiological issues,
physical things to stop us from rushing around, because nothing else will stop us.
And the women who are so busy trying to please everyone else and meet everyone else's needs and don't meet their own needs, that's not good for our physical health.
No, it's not. My God, we could talk about this forever and ever. But we need to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Katie. We've loved having you. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're a world of wisdom.
Thanks so much for having me.
People who are listening, listeners, if you have any questions or feedback, please let us know in
Spotify, socials.
Yeah, all the things. You can email us, whatever it is. We're here. Thank you.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guest speakers. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and content here should not be taken as medical or professional advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any personal recommendations and medical care. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate based on the best available information at the time of recording, we welcome any comments, suggestions or feedback via our website contact form, home.com.au/contact. Names and details of personal experiences may have been changed to allow for anonymity and privacy. To join the conversation, join us on social media at Home Postpartum.